What's going on, guys? Ben with liftedimports.com here today, and we are going to be talking about the three major lift kit size categories for lifting your Subaru. We're going to look at the three different ones, go over what they are, how to achieve them, and then at the end I'll tell you which one I think you should probably be running, which one I think is most optimal. But before we jump into that, if you want more content about lifting Subarus, you got more questions, you can head over to the liftedimports.com website, where we've got tons of featured builds from other people that are honestly just like us, that have lifted their Subarus and are now driving them off-road. A lot of these people talk about some of the different challenges that they've had to overcome in the process, and it's just a lot of good, insightful stuff. So head over there if you got more questions, but for now, let's go ahead and jump in. So number one, the first category of lift kit sizes that you're going to be looking at when it comes to lifting your Subaru is going to be just real small, basic 1/2 inch to 1 inch spacers. Now, these are typically real simple. They typically don't include any kind of geometry correction in them for the alignment. There's usually nothing complicated about them at all. You typically just slide them right over your stock strut assembly. You just put them over the strut top, boom, put it up, and it's good to go. Now, these obviously don't provide a bunch of extra ground clearance, and they're typically used for people that are just trying to accommodate a slightly larger tire, maybe a snow tire that they bought that is just a little bit bigger than stock, or if they just are running real basic dirt roads and gravel roads and want just a tad bit more clearance. Some people will go this route instead of just getting a full-blown lift kit. They'll just do this. Same with people that are trying to level out like a saggy rear suspension or maybe a saggy front suspension for whatever reason. If the suspension is a little bit lower or higher on one end, they can use these to basically level out the suspension and make it look the way that they want. Now, if you're just looking for a 1/2 inch to 1 inch lift on your car, you can actually achieve this using lift springs. And for some people, lift spring is the way to go if they're going to be carrying a lot of heavy gear, if they've got a small trailer that they're trying to tow, or anything that's going to be weighing the car down substantially. A lift spring might be the correct way to do this. Or if some people just like the more sporty handling of a stiffer suspension, this might be the way to go. They do great on the street. They're a little bit more bumpy and harsh when you leave the pavement, but it just kind of depends on your driving style and your habits. So that's the first category of sizes, between a 1/2 inch to 1 inch. The next category that you're going to run into is when you get into more full-size lift kits. So you're going to be looking at about 1.5 to 2 inch lift kits, and a lot of the 2 inch lift kits, they'll have an option to add a 2.5 inch spacer in the back, again to help with carrying a lot of heavy equipment. So like rooftop tents, spare tire carriers on the rear where you're carrying a full-size 30-inch tire. Some people want to actually have that added height in the back so the rear doesn't sag down. Same for people that are towing real small trailers. Can kind of help keep the back from just sinking all the way down. And it's kind of up to you what you want to run. Typically, I recommend people reach out to the manufacturer and figure out what's best for them. But that's the second category, 1.5 to about 2 to 2.5 inches. Now, these are going to be a medium install difficulty. They're going to be typically a little bit harder than just the small basic spacers that you put on top that are 1/2 inch to 1 inch. These actually require you to bolt them to the top of the struts. Typically going to need to do a multi-link spacer or a trailing arm spacer. If you're not sure if you need trailing arm or multi-link, just hit up any reputable Subaru specific lift kit manufacturer. ADF, Rallytech, Primitive Racing, SLO, these companies, they all know what you're going to need. If you have a full-size McPherson strut in the rear, that means you're going to need trailing arm spacers. If you've got the smaller strut assemblies that look completely different from the fronts, that means you're going to need a multi-link spacer. That's kind of irrelevant here. If you buy from a good company that knows what they're doing, they're going to know what you need. Trailing arm spacers and multi-link spacers, what they do is they help center the rear wheel in the wheel well correctly, so that you don't end up with a wheel that's pushed all the way to the front of the vehicle after being lifted. In my opinion, that looks absolutely silly. Doesn't allow for as much room in the front of the wheel well, so you can't run as big of a tire without contacting the body of the vehicle. And it's just a sloppy way to do it. So 1.5 to 2 inch lift kits. Make sure that the lift kit you're buying comes with rear geometry correction. Now this category, the medium category, really allows for the maximum size tire that a Subaru can comfortably run regardless of lift amount. So you kind of run into a position with Subarus where you run out of gearing and power and torque with a Subaru. Since we don't have 4-low, we can't spin the tires at low speeds with enough torque. So you got to be careful not to go overboard with your tire size selection. A basic 1.5 to 2 inch lift kit is really going to give you what you need to fit the optimal tire size regardless. So I think this is it's typically going to be a really good option for people that aren't concerned about how high off the ground their car is, but still want all the capability. Now, once you surpass the 2 inch lift kit mark and you jump up to 3, 4, 5, and 6 inch lift kits, this is a completely different ballgame. This is the third category, which is what I would consider to be like a very advanced lift kit installation. And it's not as simple as just putting a bigger spacer in. It's way more complicated than that. Now, there are some 3 inch lift kits out there, specifically from Rally Tech, and they don't include front subframe spacers. And so a lift kit like that, yeah, you can definitely use them, but you will absolutely start to max out your CV axles and you will burn through them quicker. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of it. But when you get into these bigger lift kits, typically companies will do them at 4 inches and above. So 4, 5, and 6 inches are typically what's available from a select few lift kit manufacturers. 3 inches is not really something that's widely available unless it's just the real basic 3 inch lift kit that kind of eats your CV axles a little bit quicker. But when you're talking about 4, 5, and 6 inch lift kits, everything's got to get spaced. So at this point, your front subframe needs to be spaced. Typically your drive line is going to need to be spaced. Your brake lines are going to need to be extended, so you're probably going to have to buy aftermarket brake line somewhere. Your steering shaft is going to actually need to be removed, cut in half, welded with an extension into it at a fabrication shop, or if you know how to do that, good for you. Your radiator hoses, those are going to have to actually be lengthened because now your engine's going to be further down in the engine bay because of the subframe spacer. Any kind of advanced lift kit that's above the 2.5 inch mark, you're really running into a lot of work. It looks cool. It definitely is nice to have the unibody of the Subaru up off the ground further, but it's not simple. I guarantee you it's a lot more work, a lot more time, a lot more money than you're probably imagining in your head right now. It is absolutely, in my opinion, something that is going to cost you easily double the amount of money as a 2 inch lift kit. In my opinion, you're not going to be running a tire that's much bigger on this. There's not a lot of added capability that comes from doing a bigger lift kit size past the 2 inch mark. Again, you're going to be running about the same tire size, but you're also going to have to consider that because of all the subframe spacing that happens, your engine, transmission, and your entire running gear is going to be at about the same height as a 2 or 2.5 inch lift kit. You've just spent all that time and money doing that, but there's not that much added ground clearance and there's not that much added benefit as far as tires go. You're kind of stuck with what you got. A super marginal amount of capability that comes from jumping up to this lift kit size. In my opinion, it's substantially more money for most people than it's worth. And I can keep up with guys on the trail that are on 4, 5, and 6 inch lift kits with almost no issue on a 2 inch lift kit, simply because I've got the same amount of ground clearance at the running gear and my tires are roughly the same size. Now, you might want to install a lift kit that falls into the advanced, big category simply because you like the way that looks. You are not going to catch me hating on you for that. I don't have a single problem with anybody doing that. If you want to run a lift kit because you strictly like the way it looks, I'm so on board with that. It's not even funny. You're not going to catch me discriminating against people's aesthetic tastes when it comes to vehicle modification. I don't care. I don't care if you fully build this thing and never leave the pavement. That does not bother me at all. People will say, oh, a nice mall crawler. Oh, oh, that's stupid. I bet it's never even seen dirt. I don't care. What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with somebody going out and modifying their car because they like it. And if you want to put a huge lift kit on your Subaru, that's totally fine, as long as you know what you're getting into going into it. You're going to need to know that it costs more money, takes a lot more time to install, and is going to just be marginally more capable than something that costs about half that price to build. So out of the three, which one would I pick? Which one would I recommend to a friend or a family member? Typically, I'm going to say for the majority of you guys watching this, sticking in the middle at the 1.5 to 2 and maybe 2.5 if you're doing a taller rear spacer, that's going to be the way to go. In my opinion, medium lift kits are the perfect amount of capable, affordable, and reliable for just about anything. You're going to be able to do the maximum amount of things that almost any Subaru can do when you're running that type of a lift. If you came to me and asked my opinion, I'm almost always going to recommend to a friend that that would be the way to go. So that's my pick. I'm running a 2-inch lift kit with a 2.5-inch spacer in the rear. It's got the trailing arm spacers. I'm running a 29-inch mud terrain tire. Absolutely love the setup. I think it's fantastic. I've had so much fun in it. It does great going on camping trips, getting out into mild 4x4 trails and things like that. Love it. Absolutely been a ton of fun. Guys, if you need more information about taking your Subaru off-road, check out the other videos on this channel. You can check out the liftedimports.com website, or if you got specific questions, hit the comments. You can also go on liftedimports.com, send us an email on there if you have a specific need or question. Subscribe to the channel if this is helpful. If you do that, you're a freaking legend. And in the meantime, let's freaking get out on these trails, and I'll see you out there.